Hi, Lena. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
It's my pleasure. I love to see fellow Vietnamese doing things in the media, and podcasting is like the new thing. So this is awesome.
It's new for us. It's a relatively untapped segment, and I hope more people will get into it because we need to amplify the stories.
Right.
I start with every episode with sort of what is your evolution of being Vietnamese? The word, the term, the idea of being Vietnamese to you.
Um, well, that's kind of hard to put it all together, but I think that everyone has an evolution, whether you evolve as just a human being or an American or a Vietnamese or a woman or a mom or a dad, right? Everyone eventually evolves. There's an evolution that goes on as you grow older, because then you experience more things and hopefully actually your thoughts and your opinions also change. I grew up like with no Vietnamese friends. I was in Minnesota and no Vietnamese friends. Back then, there were hardly any stores. There was like one Asian store. So it's not like it is now. And it certainly wasn't like it was in California or Texas and areas with a bigger Vietnamese population. So everything that I learned, how I identified as a Vietnamese girl, all had to do with my parents. And so I think that as I grew older and I experienced more and gotten more Vietnamese friends and experienced more about the community, or maybe it's just my age, I don't know. But as I grow older, like I want to go back to it. I want to hold on to it, and I'm very aware that as time goes on, if we don't learn and then pass along what we learn about the Vietnamese experience, it gets lost. Just like the World War II veterans, like they're dying every single day. We're losing them. And so there's that part of our history that I think is really important to hold on to and make sure that, my kids know about it and their children will know about it. So as I grow older, I just feel like I want to be more Vietnamese.
Why do you think that's so important to us?
Well, it should be. I'm not sure that it's important to everybody. But if it's not important and no one takes the charge, like if you don't tell the Vietnamese story, we're going to lose it. It might be something kids read about in books, but that's a shame. It should be a culture that will continue to always exist. Now, it may not and will not actually look and sound the way it does now, just like
Right.
today doesn't sound or look like it did 40 years ago. But if we don't hang on to it, if we don't pass it along, there will be no more Vietnamese, right? And I just, I mean, I can't even think of a day that is like that. But if we don't do the things like you're doing now, there will be that day.
Do you remember when you left Vietnam?
I don't. I just know stories. I mean, I was 5 years old, and I don't know if it's the human brain. You hear that when you experience traumatic things that you don't really hang on to it. I only have like really one vague memory. Now, we left at the end of April before the fall of Saigon, and I've heard stories. I often hear my mom and dad talking about it, and when they got together with friends, talking about how they got out. I only have one vague memory, and it was being handed down to a U.S. serviceman, and it's the only real memory, a real memory that I have, um, and it might be why I have such a soft spot in my heart for our troops. But that's the only memory I have. Everything I know is from stories, right? Stories that I heard my parents tell, and then came the documentaries and the books and the movies, and it was always actually very upsetting for me to watch it. I don't understand why I get so emotional about it, but I do, and it's not from, even though I experienced it, I don't tie it to personal experience.
Maybe what we saw on screen growing up as Americans weren't really what we felt were the essence of our own people, right? It's so skewed what's presented.
Right. And the thing is, even though, like, war stories are never happy, right? And but sometimes you feel like it's missing something. Like if you just tell one part of the story, well, what about the rest of it? What about how we resettled in different countries throughout the world and became outstanding citizens that contributed to the societies that they lived in? You know, that like sometimes if you just tell one part of the story, it can be so upsetting that's why you need to tell more stories. You know, like, yeah, we need to talk about the war. We need to talk about what happened and how it ended and how people escaped. We also need to talk about where are we today? What have we been able to accomplish? You know, so like I said, all stories are so important.
There are so many Vietnamese that arrived in Paris in the 50s that I had no idea. 3 months ago, I started this podcast 3 months ago. I had no idea that there was a huge body of Vietnamese that were living in Paris.
Yeah, I've heard that. And, you know, I didn't realize this, but we have relatives on my mom's side. And she has a relative who, you know, went to Russia back in I don't even know what year, but way back when. And it's like, you don't even think about it. Like Vietnamese living in Russia, right?
What was it living for you you said Minnesota, right? What was that like growing up?
Wow. Well, we were one of the first 6 Vietnamese families to resettle in Minnesota. And if you know anything about Minnesota, to go from Vietnam to Minnesota, right, is a complete culture shock. But I grew up very differently from how a lot of Vietnamese kids grew up. I had no Vietnamese friends. There were hardly any Asians in the high school that I went to. There were no schools that taught Vietnamese like there are now. Everything I learned, I was self-taught. I learned at home. You know, back then you couldn't even, you know, đi mua chai nước mắm cũng không có, you know? So it was different. But what I really appreciated about growing up in Minnesota was that they were curious about us. They wanted to know about my culture. I didn't see or experience any kind of like discrimination or racism. And I really didn't see that until I moved out here to California. So, you know, it was different. It's probably why I speak English the way I do. People ask me all the time, did you go to special classes to learn how to speak English? Well, yeah, it's called growing up in Minnesota. You know, I couldn't not have grown up in a more white environment. So that's how I speak the way I do. But it was different. You know, everything I know now, I learned as an adult. Even my Vietnamese, like I love Vietnamese, love it. But I only have enough Vietnamese nếu mà nói chuyện ở nhà, you know, nói chuyện với bạn bè is okay. But for an interview like this, like I don't know some of the words. Right. So I wouldn't be able to express myself the really way I'd like to express myself, which is such a shame. I wish there were Vietnamese schools when I was a child where I was.
How old were you? Because I obviously have followed you on Facebook for many years, and I see the different sort of like the groups of people that you hang out with and that are very Vietnamese. When did you actually start getting into more close contact with the Vietnamese community?
Well, it wasn't until after I moved to Los Angeles that I actually had, you know, and as bad as social media can be, if it wasn't for social media, I wouldn't have most of the Vietnamese friends that I have. But I mean, I learned Vietnamese because of music. I love Vietnamese music, even though like back in the 80s, I used to sing. And they always, you know, I always new wave với nhạc Mỹ because my pronunciation, and I was young and
right.
But I love Vietnamese music. But my taste in Vietnamese music is very old school because it's the songs that I heard my mom singing, right, as I was growing up. And I would want to learn the song, so I would, you know, chép lời, the way I think it should be written out, and my mom would correct me. And that's how I learned how to read and write Vietnamese. And then when I started traveling and touring with the band, I would meet the Vietnamese entertainers. And that's how I learned how to speak Tiếng Nam. Because my family is from Quảng Trị, okay? So as I was growing up in my household, strictly is Quảng Trị accent. I don't know if you know anyone, you know, Dòng nàng dữ lắm. Nói chuyện không có ai hiểu hết trơn á.
Wow.
And then people would laugh at me. And I always tell my parents, and I said, you got to tell your friends not to laugh at children who are learning Vietnamese because they'll take it personally. Like my youngest brother, you know, he was a few months old when he came to America. He speaks Vietnamese, but he hates being laughed at. No. But so through my association with some of the singers, I learned to speak less Yang Quang Tri so that people could understand me. So now when I speak, sometimes people can't place where my accent is. Sometimes it's Tinh Nam, sometimes I sound a little Tinh Bắc, and sometimes I can't help it. You know, Yang Quang Tri gets stuck in there. So, and then, you know, when I came here to Los Angeles, of course, being close to Orange County and going down there and meeting some friends on Facebook, now I have more Vietnamese friends, and I learn a lot through my friends.
But when you were in high school and you were going through your formative years, did you ever feel like the other culture, or?
Oh yeah. Oh, and it was well before that. I didn't have to wait till high school to feel that. I knew growing up that I was different. I'll give you an example. As a Vietnamese girl, I've never been to a slumber party. Okay, when kids have sleepovers, which is like the thing when you're young, never. Why? It's because you're a Vietnamese girl. You're not going to go sleep over at someone's house. It's totally improper. So I was the kid who would go to my best friend's birthday party, you know, eat, have cake, and then my parents would pick me up. I'd go home. Everyone stays for the fun slumber party. So I knew I was different. My parents were very, very strict. They placed high value on education, okay? And I grew up differently. I mean, we started with nothing when we came to Minnesota. So, you know, thinking about kindergarten, first grade, we were saving money. We weren't, and we lived in a nice area, but everything was, you know, conserving, right? You got to save. And so I started thinking, boy, my white friends sure are spoiled. You know, they were complaining about stuff that I was like, wow, because I didn't have those things, including not just material things, but also including like freedom that so many kids had that I didn't. So I knew I was different. I could have rebelled, but I didn't. And I think it did me some good. I mean, I wouldn't change how I grew up. Although if I look back at my life now, and I'm now 51 at the time of this interview, if I look back, I wish I would have let go of some of that conservative nature. That it's okay to say yes, it's okay to go out and have fun, but in my head it was always, would this make mom and dad proud? Would this make mom and dad happy? Am I being frivolous? Should I be worrying about this instead? So I grew up like that, and I'm still like that.
But do you think that's a sort of a nurture versus nature issue? I mean, you're probably, I don't know what your other siblings are like, but maybe that was something that's inherent inside of your own personality? Or do you think your parents had something to do with that? Sort of.
No, I think absolutely my parents had something to do with it. Because like now my kids are this way. Okay, so, you know, once you're a parent, you can really more clearly see how much influence you have over another human being's life and in shaping that person. So my kids have things that I never had when I was young. I like that because now I'm able to provide for them what I didn't have, right? So I'm happy about that. At the same time, even though sometimes I was sad, and especially as a teenager, crying that I couldn't do anything, I couldn't go anywhere because my parents were so strict. But I'm that way right now with my kids. And I have to learn to pull it back and let them have a little more freedom, right? And stuff that I didn't have. But absolutely, your parents have so much influence on who you are.
But what about this whole idea of like, I have kids too, and I think about this all the time. Is it a fine line where the reason why our generation is so ambitious is because of those sort of oppressed sort of cultural norms that they put on us? And if we don't sort of do that for our children and create these sort of artificial boundaries or these artificial pressures, that the ambition is going to be lost. And I think part of our second generation sort of ways that we approach life and career is because we've been sort of pressured so much. And if we don't do that to our children, what if they lose that and they just become these sort of people who are just not really ambitious?
Yeah, I mean, of course, that makes a difference. The thing is, though, that sometimes we have to kind of get away from the real old school thinking. Like my parents, of course, just like many Asian parents, not just Vietnamese, doctor, lawyer, engineer. Those really were the only three options. So when I said that I wanted to do what I wanted to do, it was kind of a, especially back then, it's like, what? But if we don't let them have a little more freedom, then you're not going to find representation.
Right.
You're not going to find Vietnamese who want to get into entertainment. And we need that because sometimes our parents fail to recognize the influence of industries that aren't your typical, successful Asian, like doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? So we need to let go of some of it, but it's that push to, if you're going to do that, and this is exactly what my dad told me, actually, fine. If you're going to do that, but be the first Vietnamese girl to do it in a big way. It was like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
We'll let you do that, but you better be the best that you can be at it. And it's still that push.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to look at it because I struggle with that all the time. I was raised in a very Catholic family and, repressed and ambitious, in ways that only refugee parents can be. But, looking back now at my children, I constantly debated, is it healthy? So, but yeah, you're right. I think pushing them to do whatever you want, but be the best at it. And I think that's still a wonderful approach. What kind of work were you thinking about getting into when you were growing up?
TV news. When I was little, I never really watched TV. One, my parents kind of didn't allow it. But the one thing that my parents would let me watch was the news. So I would go to bed at 8 o'clock because that was bedtime. And then at 10 o'clock, my mom would come and tap me, wake me up so I could go turn on the news and watch it.
Wow.
I just had this. Wow. And so I'm talking 7, 8 years old. And I wanted to be like, the people I saw on TV is like, oh my gosh, they're so smart and they know everything that's going on. And I really had this hunger for knowledge. Like, I want to know what's going on outside of this little area. I want to know what else is going on out there. And I always saw it as providing a public service. Because to me, I was like, I depended on the news, right? I watched it for weather. I watched it for what's going on in the world, even as a very, very young girl. So I've always wanted to be a reporter when I was young.
I think the only person at that time, there was no Asian male. There's Connie Chung.
Right. And I'll tell you what, when I went to school for it, I can't tell you how many teachers and professors talked me out of it. Yeah, they said, okay, it's great that you want to do this, but you're a woman and you're Asian. So maybe you want to think about doing something else. So then I don't know if that's the way they teach, like preparing me for how cutthroat the industry is.
Yeah.
But back then, you're right. It was just Connie Chung. And even when I got my first job in Augusta, Georgia, I would knock on people's doors, and I'm not kidding, and they weren't kidding. They thought I was Connie Chung. It was like, oh, you're that Chinese girl on the TV. And it was just the way they thought. And I never took it personally. But I knew that, I knew we needed more Asian faces on TV. Now it's a whole different thing. I can't tell you how many young Asian women want to be on the news for the wrong reasons. And really that you can't you're not really going to succeed in this industry if all you want to do is be on TV.
Yeah, yeah. That's sort of our influencer, Instagram generation. But what actually inspired you to think about, other than, watching it on the news, like what actually made you think that this was going to be a possibility for you?
Well, I didn't know that it was going to be a possibility. Actually, it was just really a dream, right? And then I always did very well in my English classes and my writing classes. And when I was young, teachers would say, and to them, I think that they were impressed that there's this Asian girl in their class who, I mean, I blew everyone away. I would write. I loved writing. And I think that one thing that is very kind of, when people say, what's the most important thing? Writing to me is the most important thing. Writers in the news business are worth their weight in gold. Good writers, and you don't have to be in the news, because good writing will take you far in just about every single industry you can think of. Even when you don't think it has anything to do with it, think about it. Even if you get into insurance, I mean, it's really the way you express yourself and how you deal with people. So I knew that I had a knack for language. I knew that I had a knack for writing. And so as I heard my teachers and as I could see, and I didn't even try, I know that sounds awful. Like school was such a breeze for me. Like I didn't have to study. I took tests and I was just sailing through, and I loved writing, and it was never work. And then the other thing, Ken, is that my parents were so strict. I couldn't go to friends' houses. I couldn't stay after school. I couldn't do extracurricular activities. So I loved school. And I hated summer vacation and I hated winter vacation because it meant I couldn't be around my friends. So I thrived in school.
It reminds me of when I was a young person and the mentor still in my life. I asked him, like, what's the difference between, going to college, not going to college, and what's the different, IVs? And he said, really the major difference is in the amount of reading each institutional level requires of you, right? He broke it down. It's very simple. At Harvard, Stanford, the amount of reading and the comprehension that you have to do is like at a very high level. And it made me think about what you just said about being able to write or do English properly, or to communicate. Because at the end of the day, if you're at a higher learning institution and you're understanding what you read and you're reading a lot and you can actually process it, that's really the only thing that matters wherever you go in life, right?
Absolutely.
The news, the film business, whatever you do, it's just critical thinking, the ability to think about something, read it, process it, synthesize it, and then put it down on paper.
Absolutely. You're right. Mm-hmm.
So with that knowledge and that skill set of being doing pretty well in academics for you, when did it sort of like cross over in your mind that, okay, well, being on air, being on the screen is an important thing that you can get into?
I don't know that it ever really did. Again, it was just, I so loved to watch the news, and I loved watching 60 Minutes, and I loved a lot of the investigative stuff. So I have a real old school news mentality. I always have. And in fact, part of what led to me leaving the business is that the industry has changed so much. It's not what I remember it to be. People all say all the time, it's not what I signed up for. And indeed, that was really how I felt at the end of it. But I also have this thing where, like I was saying before, this providing a public service, like I want to help people. And if that means bringing the news to you, if that means informing you, letting you know what's going on, doing a story on consumer stuff, if it means being able to help someone in some way, that's what I wanted to do. And back then I thought that if I was able to broadcast to a lot of people and tell them a story, and again, the news industry has changed so much, and news in Los Angeles is like no other market. Again, I grew up in Minnesota, so the news was really the news back then, right? And so I think that's part of it is wanting to help people, wanting to be of service to people. And to me, being a journalist was that.
I think we're going to have to jump in ahead of ourselves here because it gnaws at me. It's a gnawing question that I have, and we'll get into sort of how you broke into the business and all, but how has the news business changed?
Oh, well, I mean, I know now that my friends who are still in the business now hate the term fake news. And I do too. I don't want to be associated with it. But I think a lot of it is actually not warranted. The majority of journalists I know work really hard. They try to get it right. They don't go out there with an agenda. But sometimes it's the few bad apples, right? And then that's what everyone remembers. But behind the scenes, what's changed now is that it used to be you start in a small market, you work your butt off, right? You make your mistakes, you learn. And then if you get lucky and then you move around and then maybe you make it up to a larger market. These days, it's the bottom line. Who's going to do it for cheaper, right? There was a time where TV news was amazing. And I know this because I've always said to my friends, we are so fortunate to make the kind of money that we do without really lifting a finger. There are plenty of people who are breaking their backs out there who don't make a fraction of what we make. So let's be careful where we complain, right? You got to kind of put everything into perspective. But now it's, people who are making much less, people who are coming out of school. And now you can actually get a job in a top 10 market straight out of school. That was unheard of back then. So now you've got green people, right, working in larger markets, broadcasting to more people, and they don't have the experience. So they don't have the same kind of credibility, integrity, or responsibility, I think, of a seasoned journalist, right? And a lot of times you don't learn that stuff in school. You learn it through life experiences.
I'm sorry. Why is that being allowed? Why are these people being plucked out of sort of obscurity and lifted into the spotlight so quickly?
Well, and I think social media is a lot to blame is on social media. Like, what is the news? What is news anymore? Most of what you see these days, I mean, aside from the politics type stuff, news stations are competing with social media, right? Everyone wants to be that viral video. Everyone wants the click, right? So then now it's about, well, how many people can we just pull in, whether or not you deliver, whether or not there's substance in that story. So now you're looking for people who are more like influencers, people who are, great at tweeting or Instagramming or doing all that. And then the whole art really of journalism, right? It's the crafting of the story, it gets lost. So it's people who will do the work for less. You're just filling a little bit of space. And then you've got all these companies who it's got bottom line. You got to cut the budget. And, you cut all the high salary people. And if you're going to bring someone in who really doesn't know what they're doing, you're going to save a ton of money. But then I think the product at the end really suffers.
Yeah, the depth's not there anymore. How deep the stories and how critical the angles are they're being doled out, just like the music business too, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, if you look at, you're right about that. My taste in music has always been really, I think, old. Like, I feel like I was born in the wrong decade. But sometimes I look at the music today, I'm like, what? And then is that really talent? And then you go and you see someone live and it's like, oh my gosh, they actually can't sing.
Yeah.
But now they're super, super famous because of, all the, I don't know, like the artificial, the marketing. And so the performance part of it is lost.
Yeah, you go back to Vietnamese music and you listen to the craft of the actual lyrics that Phạm Duy or Văn Cao or Trịnh Công Sơn when
Trịnh Công Sơn, yeah.
Their lyrics, and I wouldn't profess to know everything about it, but you go back to those years and you compare it to sort of like the new wave of no, I don't mean new wave, the new music in Vietnam that's sort of on the heels of K-pop, and it's a little bit more glitz, and it's just different, and it's
well, and then but some of that also is for experience. Like if you're an artist, if you're a composer or a writer, a lot of that comes from like personal pain, experiences, right? And so back in the day, especially during wartime, and when romance wasn't all about romance, like it's not really romantic anymore these days, but they lived in a different time, different experiences, and now it's about just kind of cranking it out, right? Whatever you can crank out, whatever's popular today, rather than really sharing something that's in your heart, I think.
I think though rappers in Vietnam though are going through sort of a golden era right now, because they're actually speaking about things and things that are meaningful. I mean, it's the irony of it. It's it's the rap music in Vietnam is people, the young rappers are writing about things that are important, and that's where you're getting some real grit, some gritty.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a really, but like you compare. I don't mean to go from Vietnamese rap to the Bee Gees, but you go to the music like the Bee Gees or the music of the era that sort of in the 70s and the 80s in America, and the later like the Carpenters,
and I don't know how much of that. How old are you?
I'm 45.
Okay, so you're kind of my age, a lot younger. But I don't know how much of that is because we grew up and like in our childhoods have changed. We're living in a different time. So when we look back to the 80s, I mean, that's like so nostalgic, and like you hear the music and you're thrown back there, right? But lyrics made sense. You could guess what the word is, the next words are, because it told a story, right? These days anymore, I have no idea what they're saying. You can't what? That doesn't even make sense. But I don't know how much of that is we just love being thrown back in time. And just like our parents, if our parents listen to old music, it's got to bring back, right, the feeling of that time.
I always vowed never to be that guy, but I am that guy today.
Yeah.
Yeah. The what you had mentioned earlier about Augustus. So right after high school, during high school, did you intern at any local radio or TV stations? I mean, how did you actually step foot into it?
Well, I no, not during high school. I did intern when I was in college, and I interned at an NBC station in St. Louis. The hardest thing is getting your foot through the door, right? I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to graduate. How do I get a job? That's like the toughest thing you can think of. So this is what happened. And I've always thought that there are plenty of people with talent. Okay. There are a lot of people who have what it takes. Yes. The difference is that opportunity needs to meet that talent. Otherwise, it's going to be lost. And sometimes opportunity is more important than talent. So if you have talent, you really need the opportunity. So keep your eyes open and recognize them for what they are, because it's not always here's a job. It could be just a connection or something. So I interned, and one of the reporters at the NBC station I interned at had a friend who was a news director in Augusta, Georgia. And he said, Leyna, I told my friend Brian that you're going to send him a resume tape. Okay, so for this business, you have to have a resume tape. I was in college.
Wow.
I had no resume. So what did I do? I stayed up, I think like almost 48 hours straight, and put together a fake resume tape, which in our industry, that's it's what you're supposed to do. So I wasn't doing anything bad.
Right.
But I put together a resume tape with the stuff from the station I was interning at. Okay, so I would take a story, rewrite it, because I didn't want to just copy someone else's work. I would rewrite it And I would have an editor help me edit it. And I would now be the new reporter for this story. Sent it off. They call me up. They actually hire me over the phone even before I graduated from school. Doesn't happen anymore. Like no one would believe that. And that's how I got my first break. And it was knowing someone who knew someone, and then just pushing myself, even though I was freaking out that I didn't have a resume tape.
Wow, that's an impressive story. I mean, yeah, opportunity. I mean, it's really luck, right? A lot of the stuff is luck. Yeah, and there's so many good people in the entertainment business.
You know, I've talked to so many people who don't believe in luck. They say there's no such thing as luck. I believe in luck. And I believe in something that I think is bigger than luck, and that is, I don't know if it's karma or it's what you throw out there in the universe and what you receive. And I think I've learned from a very young age from my parents that the more you do for other people, so the more you give, the more you will receive. So I've always felt fortunate that someone up there is looking out for me, because there are many people who have what it takes. There are people who are, more beautiful. There are people who are smarter. There are people who are richer. You need that little bit of fortune to open yourself up to opportunities. And then you got to take that opportunity, right? I've learned to never say never. Like I was actually hired as a medical reporter. Hate needles, don't like nothing with medicine. But I was hired as that. 2 weeks after I was hired, the weekend anchor got sick. And I was the only one who was available. So what did they pushed me up to anchor one night, and that was it. It was stuck.
Wow.
So they asked me to do that. And then I've anchored ever since. And not everyone who gets into this business ends up being an anchor. So again, it was just an opportunity. And so I was fortunate.
What is an anchor?
So an anchor is the person who sits, when you turn the TV news on and they're sitting at the desk, they'll read stories and then they will introduce a reporter. So the reporter is the field reporter out on the scene doing live shots. The anchor is the one who gets to stay in the nice warm studio when it's cold and rainy outside.
Sometimes I have to ask questions because, a lot of this stuff is, it's watched in Vietnam and translated sometimes. And I just want to sort of ask the right questions so we can all kind of understand. How long does it typically take to become an anchor? And, what's the process?
Well, sometimes you never, there are plenty of people who never anchor, like their whole career is field reporting. And some people have no desire to anchor. I remember, my mom would always, she didn't like it when I was at the scene of a murder. I used to get texts from my mom saying, I can't believe you said that. What if the murderer comes after you? She was always very concerned about me. Or when I'm reporting on a brush fire, right? Of course, I'm going to get as close to that fire as I can because that's the best video. And my mom would always be so worried about me. So for most of my career, my parents always lived in a different state. It's only when they visited that they would see me on TV and worry about me. But, there's really no steps. Some people never anchor. Like me, I got lucky. 2 weeks later, I was an anchor into my career. And then otherwise, people who do want to anchor would be a field reporter first, hope for that time where someone gets sick and you get pushed to fill in, right? And if they like you, then you're the fill-in person. And if you do it enough, maybe if you move to another station, they may make you the permanent weekend anchor. Or you work the early morning shows where you get up at 2:30 in the morning, right? Totally unnatural. You have no life outside of that. In fact, most people in the news business really don't have much of a life outside of their work. But that's how it normally happens, is that, again, either opportunity or just working your way up.
Now, when I think of people who appear in the anchor position or reporters, I think of people who have control over their diction, of the way they pronounce, the way they carry themselves. It's all sort of, it feels very cohesive. Is that something that you are very aware of at a young age or at a young stage in your career? Or is it something that you work on and you have to kind of build that sort of persona?
I think that it's something that you work on. Certainly going through school, you learn how to broadcast, right? So you work on your performance. But I think viewers are smart. You know who you like. Like when you watch the news, right? Don't sometimes you watch the news and it's like you just don't like that person. Like, oh my God, they're being such a like Anchorman, right? The movie is so typical. I'm telling you, I've worked with so many people who are exactly
Ron Burgundy.
like him. I also worked with a person that he was modeled after. And then there are people who's like, oh, they come across a little more genuine.
Right.
Obviously, everyone has this idea of what news anchors sound like, and a lot of them sound that way. I've always thought that, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to talk to one person. I'm not trying to talk here. Like, you know what I mean? You can see the difference right away. And a lot of people do that because they think that's the way news anchors should sound. I want to talk to a person. Like the best way to tell a story is in how you tell the story. So when I'm looking at a camera and I'm very comfortable, I've never get nervous. There are people in my business who still get nervous every single time they wait to go on TV. It's just the way they are. But I think it's something that you develop. And I think that the best way is to just connect with one person, to act as if you're talking to one person. Now, sometimes you do have to be a little more formal, but I've always approached it that way, that, I want to be talking. I don't want to be reading. And there are a lot of people who just read the news.
Yeah, but that's sort of a natural sort of disposition that you have, because I get nervous every time I turn the camera on, and I'm only here because I can't control my curiosity. I just have this immense curiosity for human beings, and especially the Vietnamese. But I think that going back to the question that I had for you is it's something that is natural, it seems, to certain people. It's either they have it or they don't, right? But is it also that you can work on? Or
yes. Oh, yes.
If you can work on it, how do you work on it?
Well, I've actually mentored and then helped train a lot of people, and especially young journalists who have in their mind what they think they should sound like, right? I've also, I think, done my part in trying to steer people another way, because not everybody can be on TV. Sometimes you don't have the voice, right? It's like it's going to sound horrible. It's like a lot of Vietnamese women have a very thin voice. It's very high, right? And I remember working with a person in Sacramento, and she wanted to do what I do, Vietnamese. And I worked with her, but I knew it was going to be close to impossible for her to be doing it. I don't think that she looked the part, and I don't think that she sounded the part. But she was bright, and I loved the fact that she was persistent in getting me to help her, and in a way that wasn't very pushy. And I said to her, that you could work in this industry without being in front of the camera. You're a good writer. Concentrate on that. There are producers, there are writers, there are shooters and editors. There's so many people who work behind the scenes. So if you love the profession, maybe look at other things. Okay, that was, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 23 years ago, maybe. She years later, ended up working at KCAL as a producer. And she, she reminded me, I'm like, oh my gosh. But sometimes you need a good mentor. You need someone to tell you like it is. I talk to students all the time at school. And I think that parents and teachers sometimes do a disservice to children by saying, you can be anything you want to be. Because actually, no, you can't. Let's face it. So my message is, go for that dream. But you know what? Have a backup plan. why don't you get better at recognizing what you're good at and then capitalize on that,
right.
rather than trying to do something where don't tell your kids they can do anything they want, because truth of the matter is they can't. Prepare them, tell them to have a backup plan, help them identify their strong points and concentrate on that. So it is something that you can work on, though. So, sometimes it's just speech. Sometimes it's what you don't say. So if you tell a story, it's the way you tell the story. So when I train people, and I train like CEOs and even lawyers in talking to the media, and also just presenting and how they use speech in their everyday life and their work, it's how you talk to people. It's so important. I can sit here, Ken, and tell you absolutely nothing of substance. I can tell you nothing you want to know, give you no information, but do it in a way that has you doing this, right?
Right.
So it's all really in performance, and that is something that you can learn.
But where did you learn that part of it? Where did you learn that sort of intangible aspect of this?
For me, it probably is natural, I think. Right? Like I never had a problem with it. For instance, like today, if you see someone going live on social media, you'll know who you want to keep watching. And think about it. They're talking to you, so they're talking to just their phone, right? But there's a difference between people who do it really well because you feel like they're connecting with you, and then people who are just going live and like, whatever, you scroll on to the next thing. So I think some people just have it. Some people like it. Like, I don't mind just looking at a camera and talking. So like, especially Zoom. If you're doing an interview and you know that someone's going to be watching you at home, I could sit here and just look at you, Ken, right? I could just look at you and do this. And so I can talk, but then you're not connecting. So if you're looking straight into the camera and you actually, in your head, is like, okay, I'm talking to Ken and I'm looking at him right now like I'm looking at him, completely different, right? So it's so many things. It's in body language, it's in words, it's in what you don't say, taking your time, using pauses. It's a bunch of things. And if you pull it all together, then you become a really good presenter.
It's really about engagement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Really about engagement, human engagement. I was, just listening to you and just realizing framing and the sort of how you're being, connecting with the camera. It's huge. And that's something that, like, maybe that person in Augustus sort of picked up right away in the early days, right? But it's mind-blowing to me because, like, straight out of the gate for you, it's something that somebody recognized and you already had it, and it's just like a matter of going and moving forward from that point, right?
Yeah. And here's another funny thing. Like, I didn't know what agents did in the business. I was young. I had no idea what they did. This is how I moved out of my first job. So then the next battle is, how do I get to my next job after my first job? My co-anchor was looking for an agent. And when you do that, you send an agent your tape. And if they like you, they'll take you on. I was on a 2-shot. Okay. So that's when you see both anchors. I was on a 2-shot, just, the stupid anchor banter where you fake talk to each other. And the person he was trying to get as an agent liked what he saw in me and called me up. And that's how I got an agent. So Augusta, Georgia's market 110. My next move, I'm thinking, I'm hoping to get up to maybe market 70, which at that point maybe still is Shreveport, Louisiana. That was what I was shooting for. Instead, I got from market 110 to market 19 in Sacramento.
Wow.
And then from market 19 to LA, which is market number 2. So again, I just think I'm so lucky that things happen when they did. And I think that's another thing, whether it's work or your personal life, Ken, is that I believe everything happens for a reason. So, like, good or bad, right? anything that you've done,
Yeah.
good or bad, if you're happy where you are right now, then it's all worth it. Like I look back and I'm like, gosh, that was awful, but I'm so glad that happened, because if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be here where I am today. So sometimes you need to make mistakes to get where you want to be.
Now, the agent finds you after the first market and you move on to the second market, Sacramento, right? How long were you at Augustus, and then what kind of prompted you to move to Sacramento? Like, why would you make the decision to go, okay, it's a good enough place to end?
Well, when Augusta, Georgia was market 110, I was there longer than I should have been, because I had a boyfriend. And I loved the small market. I loved all my friends I worked with. We were like a real family. They always say, oh, CBS is a family. No, we really were like a family, because we were all out of school, right? You're young, you're struggling together. Such a fun time. So I was there for a year and a half, which is actually a long time if you really want to move. To me, it was a long time. When I went to Sacramento, I signed a 4-year contract. And to me, that was a quarter of my life, okay? A 4-year contract at that point felt like a prison sentence.
Wow. Why'd you sign it?
Because I was going from market, 110 to Sacramento. I mean,
Why not
and
like a
not
2-year contract.
Was that?
Why not like a 2-year contract, something shorter?
Well, because when you're in TV news, the longer the contract, you want a long contract.
Ah, got it.
Okay. But sometimes you don't. And looking back, I wish I didn't. But then again, everything worked out, nicely. I should have come to Los Angeles a lot sooner than I did, but I was stuck in a 4-year contract and they wouldn't let me out of it. So I passed up on LA once, and then LA came calling again. And so really it was just fate that after doing 4 years in Sacramento, I was able to come to Los Angeles. But that's a fast move. That's relatively a fast move up in the industry.
Right. I want to just ask a weird business question, but
Sure.
From an agent's point of view, why would, how do they make the money if you're only moving every 4 years or 2-3 years? It's not like, how do they make, you know what I mean?
Because they make a percentage on your salary.
Oh, so
if you don't work, one, they don't make any money. Okay. They make 10%, although, and again, I was lucky. Most agents make 10% of your salary.
Oh, wait, in perpetuity and during the whole time you're working?
During that contract. So they want you to have a long contract.
Oh, wow.
But your contracts have built-in raises, right? And then it would be in their best interest to move you up to a higher market, because then you're making more money.
That's the other question I was asking. Because if they only make the deal once, how are you being moved around and making money for them? And then the incentive is lost if they're not moving you around. But I get it
Right.
now. So they're actually making money on every check that you bring in?
Yeah. Yep. 10% of your salary.
That is a good business.
Yes.
That's a great
Especially if if you have a good agent, if your agent has like a few good clients, they're making bank.
They're making real good bank because they don't have to do anything. Because after you get signed to Sacramento, that's 4
Right.
years that they don't have to do anything, right?
Right.
Unless
Unless you have an issue. Let's say, if you have an issue when you call up your agent. But I'm always been one of those clients where like, I didn't even know what my agent sounded like or looked like, because it's like, okay, you guys handle it, and that's that.
And what about speaking engagements and that sort of work? Do those come through to the agent as well?
No. So, and I probably missed out on a lot of things. I always volunteered my time throughout that whole, I always volunteered my time. At CBS, at KCAL, Public Affairs told me that I was their most requested speaker. I, on my time off, volunteered my time, emceed events, And then almost at the end of it, I found out that all of my coworkers were taking money each time they went to an event, each time they emceed. And here I am. I was just volunteering all of my time, which is fine. And I love doing it. And I did a lot. It gave me a great experience, and I made great friends. But at some point in your career, you have to be paid for it. People can't expect you to just volunteer your time anymore. And that's difficult now for me to do because I was doing it for so long.
Yeah, I can imagine. Through my research, I've found out that you were anchoring for 2 different TV stations. Is that right? CBS and KCAL. Like, how did you find yourself into that situation?
So that's what's called a duopoly. And before like 1999, it was illegal. Like one company couldn't own 2 TV stations in the same market. And then when they changed the rules, KCAL-9 was purchased by Viacom, which owned CBS. So we were the first duopoly. It was the weirdest thing. Like no one knew what was going on. It was actually a really scary time to be at both stations, because if you're going to combine, well, we thought of it as combining 2 stations, a bunch of people are going to get fired, and a bunch of people did. They came to me and they said, we're going to have you, after, doing the show here, we're going to have you run down to CBS and anchor a show over there. And no one had heard anything because we were in 2 separate buildings. And I remember thinking, oh my God, they're going to hate me over there because I was the enemy coming in, right?
Oh, wow.
For the people who worked there, I was the enemy. And people did lose their jobs. And again, here's another instance where, one, you've always heard you don't burn bridges, right? The way you treat the people you work with, also very important. And do it in a way that's respectful. I'm not saying office politics is awful. So don't be kissing ass, because that can only get you so far, right? And
right.
Then the person you're kissing up to, they eventually go away. And then what? But I was always straightforward and nice I hated the whole, there's so much drama on a TV station. If they made a show about it, you wouldn't even believe it. You would think it's all dramatized. It doesn't even come close to what it's really like. So I knew that they were seeing me as the enemy coming in. But I made great friends, and it was a slow process in getting both stations together. It took years to get both stations together into one building, but I was the first person to anchor at one TV station and go to another one in the same market. It was the weirdest, wildest thing. Yeah, they just asked me to.
But they compete, right?
Yeah. We were competitors. But then now, at that point, we were owned by the same company. And so that was the beginning of this. That's the beginning of, you now work for 2 stations, so you've got like a lot more shows to do.
And what did if you don't mind me asking, did the pay sort of increase, or is it the same hours that you put in?
No, it wasn't the same hours that you put in. It was, you would have hours. It was more work in the same hours, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
There were days where I would anchor 8, 9 newscasts. When back in the old day, you have some people who only do 2 newscasts. So that's how much more the workload got. And that's where you have to have a good agent who, the next time your window comes up, the next time your contract comes up, will ask and get you more money.
But did you ever bring the same stories or the same preparation from one station over to the other, sort of just verbatim pick up and then bring the other? Would you do that?
A lot of the reporters did that a lot. And then, we went through stages where reporters had to learn how to make it a little bit different, right, for the other station. And then it wasn't either, we no longer looked at it as the other station. Then it was just another time slot, another newscast, right? And then they would keep the anchors separate so that you still had 2 identities and just share reporters. And then it was, we're just gonna throw it all together. Reporters, anchors, whatever, producer. Wow. Everyone was working for both stations.
Okay, and that leads me to my next question about identity, station identity. It just felt to me, especially after the last 4 years of the previous administration, that station identity like a CNN or a Fox, you know, in maybe 10 years ago, it was such a, it was beginning to feel like there were teams, right? There was like, you played for this team, you played for that team politically, and they would, you know, have these identities. But is that something that, you know, being part of the news industry, do you feel like that's evolved over the years, or has it always been that way, but it was just more nuanced and more subtle sort of in the early days of you getting into the business?
Well, everything has changed. So let's say if you're talking about competition, right? Sometimes when people work for a TV station, you feel a loyalty to that network, right? And some people always stay with that network. But the reality is you go where the work is. You know, I went from CBS to NBC, to an independent, then to CBS again. The whole thing with like CNN versus Fox, if you look at it, you probably could see some of the same nuances back in the day, right? But not the way you see it today. Like now, suddenly, especially in the last 5 years, maybe, like TV stations are okay putting opinion out there. Like when was that ever okay?
Yeah.
That's how the industry has changed. I hate it. And I've become, through the 2 decades that I was in the business, it's like my job is not to have an opinion. That actually is my job, is not to have an opinion. I can't tell you how many people want to tie me down to an opinion, and they get mad if I don't tell them. But that's always been a professional and now a personal policy that no one knows how I think politically. Now, I argue with a bunch of people, mostly on how they presented themselves on both sides.
Right.
Like no, even my close friends don't know how I voted. That's the way I prefer it. And that's the way the news should be.
But it's not. And
no, it's not. You know why it's not? The reason why it's not, and it's the same thing with social media, is because they found an audience for it. They found an appetite for it. As much as we hate it, there is an appetite for being really right or really left. And so if there's an appetite, they're going to feed it. So who do you blame? You actually blame the public, because if you guys wouldn't watch, they'd have to go to something else.
Well, do you blame the public, or do you blame what I would call, right now, I just thought of it, polarity algorithm?
Oh, right. Now you're talking smart stuff.
No, I mean, if you think about it, with the advent of computers, with the advent of software, we are now understanding polarity sells. Polarity moves the needle. And with the algorithms that these social media, or probably Nielsen, at the ratings level, they probably understand this idea of shifting polarities, and that is where the dollars are coming in.
Yep, you're right.
That destroyed...
Yep.
That's destroying the fabric of society almost.
You're absolutely right. And years ago, I already saw this coming, and I remember talking to coworkers and saying, you know what, this changes everything, like the whole landscape of journalism. Not anything that when we first signed up for it, we won't ever go back. And that happened actually very, very quickly. And it's part of the reason why I got out. There's just so much negativity. And, as a journalist, you're not supposed to, and on the local level, I think it's still this way. You're not supposed to fight back. You're not supposed to respond to anyone. You take it on the cheek. It's like, when people complain, and I've had people complain from both sides. When I called President Obama, Mr. Obama, I got so much stuff from people. It's like, you're not showing him any respect. Call him president. You have a problem with the black president? And then when I called President Trump, Mr. Trump, I would get so many emails and tweets and stuff from, Trump supporters who said, what, he's not your president? Why don't you refer to him as, and it all came down just to AP style.
Wow.
He's the only person we call Mr. We don't call anyone else Mr. The president actually has that we reserve for the president. It's actually a show of respect.
It's not so ironic,
right? And the wonderful thing, of course, now I just screenshot everything, and I just bring it all up. I'm like, hey, That's the way we do it. This is the way we did it 4 years ago, and this is the person who complained about it then. So it's fair on both sides, but people don't realize the things that we do in journalism. They just see and they think something, and we're not supposed to respond to it.
What are some of the things that you've learned on the job that wasn't taught in school or wasn't really in your formal training?
Oh, well, school never prepares people for life. It teaches you stuff. But how can you read in a book what it really is like to work in a newsroom? I never knew that one day I would be like fighting management on what stories to do or not to do. When I was hired in Los Angeles, at that point, I was the youngest person on air that they'd ever hired. And when I got the job, one, I was happy. Two, I was nervous. I'm like, now what? What have I gotten myself into? Am I really ready for this? And then I came to Los Angeles, and I thought the news here was atrocious. One of my first stories was George Michael, right, caught masturbating in a bathroom. It was the lead story. And I'm like, what? But that's Los Angeles news. Just awful. But they don't prepare you for these battles that you have to pick and choose. One of the first specials that they wanted me to do was an expose on Asian sex slaves.
Wow.
And I fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it, and I ended up not having to do it because I was really, I'm like, you want this to be my introduction to the community? That's awful. And then, we were the Lakers station. So each time there was a Lakers game, the news would be just smut. It was all about ratings. It wasn't news. They'd send me to a strip club. They sent me to Vegas all the time. And I used to fight it. They don't teach you that in school. And at one point, I got the reputation for being difficult because I was questioning them. Sometimes they just want you to just go out and do the story. And I was told, they hire you to do a job, and your job is to deliver. But a good journalist won't just shut up and do what they're told. You're not just gonna shut up and read the script. You have to know when to push back. You have to know when to challenge it. Because although we're supposed to be objective, there are writers who aren't objective. There are producers and news directors who aren't always objective. So it's your job to question it. And they don't teach you that. Ton of office politics. Awful. That you can only learn from life experience. And it can be really challenging. So you either sell out and just say, you know what, I'm just going to give them what they want. Or you learn to kind of make a spot for yourself where you're comfortable fighting back. You're comfortable saying no to your boss.
Now, looking back on it all, do you think about the battles that you fought and think that was worth it? Or do you look back and you're like, oh, what was I even thinking? And, I should have just let it go because it was just too much. It was so taxing mentally and psychologically for you that you should have just given in. Where do you find yourself on that scale?
I can say this because I am where I am now, because I'm so content and happy right now. And when people say happy, I'm not sure that everyone has a different definition of what happy is. To me, and it's something that Gandhi had said, and that was, happiness is like when what you say, what you do, and what you think are all in sync. So how many of us say and think one thing, but we're kind of forced to do something else, right? And so now I'm at a place where I really feel happy. And so, yes, every single one of those battles was worth it. I can tell you that I was often told by my agent that I needed to play nice in the sandbox, that I needed to be a little more social with my general manager, that, and I'm maybe that's part of the Vietnamese thing growing up. Like I wanted to call him Mr. and then his last name, right? I have I think, healthy respect for authority.
Right.
And I was asked to go out. I was asked to go have drinks and tequila shots and do all that. And I wouldn't do it. But the girl who did go from being a freelance reporter to full-time anchor to, you know what I mean? So I do think that I was held back in my career. Eventually I got there. Eventually I got the primetime anchor spot. And I did it through hard work and merit. Like, you know, it's not that I went out for drinks with him. And that happens a lot in this business. So it was tough to be true to yourself and know that, okay, well, you know, you're not going to get promoted. For 13 years straight, I worked every single holiday and weekend. But I am where I am now, and I don't have to look back and feel bad that I kept my dignity, right? And did what I thought was right. So yeah, they were tough. And I'll tell you, sometimes you're going through that stuff. Very often you think yourself, you know, I should have just kept my mouth shut. I should have just did what they wanted me to do or not complained or whatever, and I wouldn't be going through all this stress. Looking back now, I'm glad that I did because I am where I am now. But it's not always easy to stand up for something that you think is right.
You know, you were in it for 20 years, and, you know, at what point did it start to creep in your mind that this is a sort of a corrosive sort of industry? I mean, the way you're explaining it sounds really corrosive sometimes, but like, at what point did you sort of like the imagery of it being such a pedestalized version of what you wanted to do in your life started to crack away?
It was probably, I'd say the last 10 years, I could see stuff was changing, but very often, a lot of it changes with management. So you may have managers in there who, you know, I mean, at one point was like, okay, no more suit jackets. And then it was all about low cut blouses, and it was very sexualized. And then, you know, you have a change of the guard, and it's a whole different thing. So I always said to my friends, I'm like, you know what, you guys, I'm going to be like the cockroach. I'm going to survive every bomb they throw in here. So I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to do, right. I'm not going to be the social butterfly. I said to my agent, I said, you know what? I don't ask him how his weekend was because I don't care. And it was a very tough battle for me. I said, it's hard for me to stand in there. Like, I don't go to the news director's office because to me, that's like the principal's office. Like, I don't want to be in there unless I'm in trouble. And that's how I always treated it. But then you've got people who are like, you know, the brown nosers are always in there and always this. And like, you know, that they don't even like the news director, but they're just kissing up. And I can't stand that. So that happened a lot.
Yeah, there's a very political side too.
Yeah. And then towards the end of it, we did get the best news director I ever worked with and for. And then it revived my passion. And then he got fired. And then it was like, oh, you know, and so the management makes a big, big difference. But really the past, I'd say 4 years of my time there was a big battle. It was a lot of internal battles up here. And it was difficult. And one of the difficult things is money, is because I made a great living. I made a very nice paycheck for talking, right? And that's hard to walk away from. It was very scary to then walk away and it's like, well, now what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And how am I going to do it? But at some point in your life, and I think everyone goes through it, especially in my age range, you need to figure out what's more important, like what's up here and what's in here versus what's in your pocketbook.
What finally made you walk?
Well, it wasn't a one-time deal thing. It was, you know, really a build up to it. And my kids, I turned 50. My kids were in middle school and one was about to go into high school. And one thing that people don't think of is I worked nights, you know, so 2:30 to 10:30 every day during the week. Like I didn't put my kids to sleep, and people take that for granted.
Yeah.
They would accidentally call me by the nanny's name. They were learning Spanish without me. And so I knew that it was a family decision that I had to make. It was for my own, like mental stability, and also just to be more a parent and be there for my kids. I knew that they were going to go through those pre-teen years and teen years that they really needed me. And that was important to me. And I couldn't be happier. I'm telling you, people thought I was weird because all of a sudden I was driving them to like soccer games and I was so happy. I'm like, oh my God, you won't believe it. I did this. And that's something most people outside of the business don't normally take for granted.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to just be with the kids and be present and just be there, even if you're not doing anything, just to be there.
You never get that time back.
Yeah.
Never get it back.
I want to go back a little bit to an actual news cycle. I've always wondered how, like, I'll just use the term, like when a bomb explodes somewhere to the point where I'm watching it in my living room. Can you kind of walk me through sort of like that process?
Sure. So obviously it's different if it's breaking news, which is what you're talking about. And then there's planned news. And most of what we end up doing is planned news, where you go in, you get an assignment, you make your phone calls, you drive around, you meet people, interview, write, and edit. I loved breaking news because then I didn't have to do all that because I can talk, right? I'm an ad-libber. So when it's a situation like you're talking about, where it's a big thing and something happens, we hear about it. First thing that the assignment desk does is they start dispersing crews. We'll see who's in that area right now. Oh, so-and-so is doing a story, just down the street, or so-and-so is doing a story in the neighboring city. Break them and then send them over to wherever the breaking news is. That's the best. I love breaking news. Now, if it's a news story that no one knows about yet, but it's a breaking news, a lot of it comes in from tips. So these tips could be from a viewer, okay, who, because they always love Channel 9, they're going to email someone they know at Channel 9 or call Channel 9. Or it could be from a source. Like I have a lot of friends in law enforcement who will call me up and say, hey, no one knows about this yet, but okay, love those. That's called getting the scoop. And then you just have to have sources that you trust. Okay, that what they're telling you is true. And then you as a reporter need to have some kind of pull and what's the word? Like when your producer or your boss, when you come to them with a story, they need to trust that one, you can make it happen and that you actually know what you're talking about. Because sometimes people will feed you stuff that's turns out to be nothing. It happens all the time. So you need to be the person who they can count on. And then you just start making calls and you run out the door. And the one thing that you want is to be the first on the scene and the first to go live. Most of the time, they don't care about anything else. You set up, put your mast up, get a live shot out so that they can come to you. Very often, you have no details. None.
Wow.
Most of the details is from back at the station. They will call the cops. They will call the spokesman and get the real information. But the most important thing is to get the live shot up and just have a presence. You want to be known as the first on the scene. And then the other thing is, we know that if we're live on something, you're going to stay and watch. Okay? So we'll be first, and then maybe it'll take us some time before we get the real information to you. But if you're already watching us, we've got you. You're not going to switch over to someone else unless we take a break. That's why you will see wall-to-wall coverage.
Right.
We will not take a stupid commercial break because the moment we do, what do? You switch channels. So it's all about keeping, getting viewers and keeping them. But on a big breaking news story like that, yeah, as soon as you hear about it, you start dispersing as many people as you can to the area.
That makes me think about again, back to the business model. There's two things that I question. If things are breaking all the time, where do you find, a commercial advertisement isn't that sort of an antithesis of sort of making money? Because as a news station, you rely on, ad revenue and getting in there to kind of put commercial breaks in. But if you're breaking there, you could be hours wall to wall and not, make money. I mean, so how does that?
Well, but this is what you're doing is you're building your reputation and you're keeping up the reputation. So first of all, like what's happening, like if there's breaking news during sweeps period, ratings period, oh my gosh, that's like a gold mine, right? Because you want the numbers, you want people to watch. All the other times really don't matter. That's why there's sweeps periods, right? There's a February, May, a little bit of July, November's huge book in November. Even though they say they're not doing that anymore, they still are. But that's how you measure with the Nielsen's ratings. That's how you're able to go to advertisers and say, look at our numbers. We beat Channel 7.
Right.
More people watch us. And then that's how you make your ad revenue. It really doesn't matter on a day-to-day basis.
Got it. I would love to spend a lot more time on the news business, but I know that podcast is sort of something I want to know about because you are in that space and you've been in that space for quite some time now. I kind of watched your evolution because I remember when you're like, something big's happening, you were going to announce, and then it was a podcast, but then it sort of like evolved or morphed into what you have today, or is it two different things that I'm curious to hear your evolution in, right after the news, how did you shift and what did you shift into and where are we at today?
So I don't know if you're referring to, it took a lot of people by surprise that I left the news. And so I was building up to it and I said, I've got a big announcement to make.
Yeah.
I couldn't yet because it wasn't official yet. So the big announcement was actually leaving the news. After that, I took a little time to just enjoy my freedom of going out to eat, taking the kids to practice, that kind of stuff. But I still have the hunger that I have. I mean, I've had my fill of the news business, but this thing about connecting and talking to people is still something I have. I have it today. I'll never lose that. People ask me if I miss the news. No, I have not watched a single newscast since July 26, 2018. And I was really surprised to see that, oh my gosh, the universe doesn't revolve around us news people. Because when you're in the business, you're always working. I'm always listening to news. If I don't, I feel lost. Or, what if someone dies or someone, of notoriety dies and I don't know about it, but you're always working. I see smoke. I'm out with my kids. What's the first thing I do? I call the station. Oh my gosh, you guys, there's smoke over here. And I just right into reporter mode, right? Suddenly I was breathing and I felt relaxed. And I can tell because friends who would see me like maybe a month or two after I quit, they're like, oh my gosh, you look young. I've never seen you this relaxed. And I didn't know I was holding it all in like that. But I still wanted this connecting with people and talking to people. So I didn't know anything about podcasting. I didn't know anything about setting up a microphone. And you know what I loved? I loved doing it by myself. I could have hired somebody. Mm-hmm. I was researching what the microphone, best microphone is. I was researching how to do mixers and how to edit and I spend as little money as possible. Maybe because I'm Vietnamese. But, I spent a lot of money on my mic and then that's it. And then everything else was just, pulling stuff in. If I can get it for free, I'm going to get it for free. I'm going to spend money that I don't have to, right? So the first, and it was a great reception, and I'm lucky because I had all these contacts. So I would do celebrity interviews and talk about stuff I wanted to talk about. Yeah. And I named it Leyna Nguyen Unscripted because it was just a conversation. I wasn't reading anyone else's words. These are questions I want to ask. And that was a lot of fun. And then I decided to move. And boy, I broke everything down. 10 years living in a house, looking for a new house. The worst thing you ever want to do for a podcast is what? Stopping. Worst thing you can do is stop. consistency is the number one thing you must keep up with in podcasting. And it was, so once you, and like anything else, like an exercise routine, once you stop, it's so easy to stay still. Starting it up again is like starting over again. And then, it's like a year or two later, I had that itch again. So I turned 50 and I'm talking to a friend. And she gives me this piece of information, blows my mind. So she tells me that she and her husband are swingers. And I was like, what? and I was really curious. And so, and then I started talking to someone else. I'm like, I was talking to my friend and I couldn't believe it. She's the most regular, normal person you could ever think of. And they're swingers. And this friend goes, oh yeah, my wife and I go to the sex club and I'm like, what? And so I was finding out that there are these people who do this and no one really knows about it. So that's how consenting adults, the idea for it came up. Now, as you know, anyone with a microphone and a computer can start a podcast, right?
Right.
Yeah. I didn't want to just do that, although that's fine doing that. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you want to make money doing it, you have to take it a little more seriously, right? You got to look at how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, how often you're going to do it, how long can it really go? Will you run out of guests? That kind of thing. Well, one thing we know, everyone's interested in sex, whether or not they would admit it, right? Even the most conservative person is still interested in sex. So I think the subject matter can pique a lot of interest. My problem was, how do I do it and make money? Again, here comes the contacts part. So I have a lot of contacts in the industry, but they're all TV people. One of my contacts has a friend in the radio industry. He, at one point, was involved with Cumulus One, Westwood One, Cumulus Radio. Remember the Dr. Drew show?
I do.
Is it called the Dr. Drew show? Loveline. Okay. To me, my dream job would be to work in radio, not, I don't have to worry about makeup. Sit there and talk about something interesting. Mm-hmm. So I pitched it and I really just went for it. I'm like, one, I'm either going to offend him or he's going to think, okay, this is interesting. And thank goodness he's like, tell me more. He flew out from Atlanta to meet with me. Great lunch. And then it was, right? He didn't even realize how fast I could move. I got a trademark and I started interviewing and making episodes. I had 20 episodes in the can before I even launched.
Wow.
Because I didn't want to get behind. And they love it. It is the outside of Nat Geo. So they have a podcasting network. I signed a contract with them. Outside of Nat Geo, who, of course, they're huge, right? Mine is then the second podcast that they have. We grew so fast. We grew even faster than their American Idol Memories podcast. So what does that tell you? It tells you a lot of people are going to listen if you're talking about sex. Now, I really was concerned. I talked to my husband about it. I didn't talk to my parents about it. I still can't. Is once you go there, you can't go back. Right? Once you go down this road of talking about this kind of stuff, although these days I think the lines are blurred, but I have no interest in going back to TV news. So there's no concern. But I was very concerned about my reputation in the Vietnamese community and how the Vietnamese community would see this.
Right.
Because I'm very tied to them. I care. People can say, oh, I don't care what they think. No, I care. I care what the Vietnamese community thinks of me. They've always been great supporters. I don't want to disappoint them. So I wanted to do it in a way that wasn't salacious. It's not, it's not TMZ. It's a lot of information. It's for adults only, but it's in a way that's just curious conversation. and getting to know what people are doing behind closed. These are teachers, doctors, lawyers, cops. And I'm so happy that they trust me enough to share their stories. And I'm so happy people are listening. I mean, we're growing very fast. I'm really happy about it.
It sounds like the Beautiful Planet. There's a Beautiful Planet TV. It's a nature program. It sounds like you're approaching it like the Beautiful Planet approach. It's
right.
very mechanical, but kind of not salacious. But you're really in there to find out what is really going on back there.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, I have a curiosity about everything, and that's what makes you a good interviewer, right? Like,
Right.
if you don't care, you're not going to ask the right questions. So I care. I want to know, like, but how do you do that? Or why? Why would you want to see your wife with someone else? I really am curious. I am so curious and ask such good questions. People ask me all the time, "Are you in the lifestyle, Leyna?" And they'll ask me like 5 times.
Can I answer this real quick?
Yeah.
I think it would be very difficult to have interesting questions if you were in fact in the lifestyle.
Right.
So,
Because
yeah.
because you have to have a curiosity, and you have to like really wonder something to ask the questions that the people at home are wondering. Right?
Absolutely.
So like if I was going to interview a journalist, I know it all already. I
Mhm.
may not ask the right questions that you at home want to know. So I ask those questions, and I'm not shy about asking questions. And people think I must be in the lifestyle because I ask such great questions. It's actually just the other way around. It's like, no, I know nothing, and that's why I ask these questions.
And I know that because I don't know much about Vietnamese people. That's why I do this.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. I really don't know. I really question my own. It's like sort of like closeted, or I don't really know what the history is and the politics or any of it. And sort of, I'm afraid sometimes of getting in trouble because of the community aspect of it all. But I just have to do it. I just have to get more. So I understand where you're coming from. It's like, it's only curious if you're not participating in it.
Mm-hmm.
You can only be curious if you're not really participating.
Right. Right.
What my question is, how do people actually agree? Because if they have careers and if there are people who are doing like teaching or whatever career they're doing, aren't they kind of afraid to kind of like go on and talk about this stuff?
So let me tell you that a couple of the people that I've interviewed, if I told you what their real names were, you'd be like, oh, okay. One thing that has actually helped me, is that they know who I am. They'll look me up. So even if they're not from here, like I've interviewed a lot of people from the East Coast and then Texas, and they look me up and they see who I am and they trust me. They trust that I'm not going to burn them. Right. So that's helped me. It's difficult to get someone to open up and tell you something that, I mean, if they were outed, it could ruin
them.
their lives. If you knew what your kids' teachers are actually doing on their free time, you would be shocked. If you knew that your nurse or your doctor goes to sex clubs and has sex with other people while their partners are you'd be like, what? Yeah. But it's happening, and they're actually happy people. Like, what does it matter what they do behind closed doors? And I'm finding out that people, especially you get off your 40, 45, people in their 50s, they're really, really happy because now they're doing stuff with consent. They've already taken care of the kids, right? They've got a great career going already. Now they get to enjoy themselves. And they're doing it in a way where everyone's consenting and no one's jealous. And they're really, really happy. I mean, they're a lot happier than a lot of married people that I know.
But this isn't an audio. This is just an audio podcast and not a visual, like a sort of YouTube kind of thing. Right.
Although people keep asking me, there are a couple of people who are completely open, and I do have video. Like there's an episode that I'm dropping today where I interview a porn star. So she's in the adult industry. So of course she's not shy. I got video. What I do is I use some of those video clips to promote the episode. And at some point I may put it on video, on YouTube, but right now it's just audio. The wonderful thing about a podcast that you should absolutely use to your advantage is that, especially for my show, you could be sitting there next to your kid and listening with headphones on. They can't hear a thing. You can enjoy it in the privacy of your own head. So it's easier to push things that are maybe not always comfortable. You don't have to be watching TV and have someone walk in, let's say, right? So, or when people get back to driving long distances for work again, podcasting is going to really go through the roof. Yeah.
How do you, I don't want you to give away the special sauce or anything like that, but anything proprietary, but how do you find guests? Social media
and word of mouth. So let's say I talk to you, you have a great experience. Like, they all thank me afterward, which is like, I'm thanking them. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing your story. Because without it, I wouldn't have anything, right?
Yeah.
But they're thanking me for giving them a platform and making them feel comfortable, letting them share their story. So when I interview someone and they feel great afterward, right? There's always something, like if you live a secret life, if you've got a secret, there's just something about being able to share it. And if you're able to share it without getting in trouble, awesome, right? So when they feel good, they're going to tell their friends, their other friends in the lifestyle. I have people who contact me all the time saying, you know, I'm friends with so-and-so who's on your show, and I'd love to tell my story. And so I have no shortage of guests. And the thing is, I could be doing this for a long time. I'll get old, okay? But my guests, they'll always be there. Do you remember Dr. Ruth?
Yeah, I do. I love her show. Yeah.
Yes. How old was she? And she was doing all this stuff.
She was like well into her 70s or 80s, right? Or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could continue doing this. My guests, always new waves of people, and it's never ending.
Do you find, or are you ever afraid that some of the stories are sort of repetitive in their structure?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I do, but what I'm finding out is that you can have a very similar story, meaning the journey that you took, but everyone's story is different. I will tell you that in sometimes listening to my podcast, I'm like, all swingers are starting to sound the same to me. So what do? I start spacing and finding guests and spacing it so that that's different. So like, the episode today is on a sex worker. And did you know there's like an explosion in sex work because of the pandemic? And sex work isn't just prostitution. People got OnlyFans accounts. People are doing things inside their home and making a lot of money. And they're not all what you would call beautiful people. And there's a kink for everyone. People are turned on by the weirdest things. Whatever you can think of, trust me, there's someone who gets off on that. So today, sex worker. Next week, I have an episode on a guy who's a cuckold. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I think I do.
Oh, you do? I didn't. I've seen that word, and the word actually makes me uncomfortable because it sounds weird. It looks like something else, and I didn't understand it. And what I'm always shocked about, Ken, is when I talk to these people, and at first going in, I'm thinking, okay, he's a little weird. And then I talk to him, I'm like, oh my, he's totally a normal person. Mm-hmm. And he makes whatever this is sound completely normal. Oh,
yeah.
Of course you love to be humiliated by your wife. I can see that. I can see why. And it's amazing. But yes, I do feel sometimes that when the stories get to be a little too similar, everyone's visiting a sex club, everyone's fantasizing, and they end up doing this. I try to space them out. But because of the nature of the topic, there is something for everybody. I don't even need to get weird yet, but if I should need to,
It's there.
I've got them.
Yeah.
People who are turned on by pain, everything. I hope to never have to like interview men who like to wear diapers because it turns them on sexually.
Yeah.
But there's that too.
Yeah.
So,
we hear about the ocean that's on this earth and how we only know just sort of a little bit about the science of marine biology or whatever's happening in the ecosystem of the ocean. Or, space is obvious. Logically, we're not going to know a lot about it. But I think the human mind is sort of like that. It's that in that domain where sexuality is just part of our brain, but it's such an unexplored place.
well, and it's such an important place actually. And I think that I never talked to my parents about it. I don't know if you did, but never.
Not today even.
I still get uncomfortable if I'm watching a movie and people kiss on screen if I'm in the same room with my parents, and I'm 51. So I never talked about it. And I'm not sure that that's healthy. So we're all here because of sex, right? That's how we all came to be. And it's actually something to be enjoyed. It's one of the best things of life. So why not arm ourselves or our children? And I'm not saying talk to children about it because I can't even, I don't want to think about it. Don't want to think about it. But I want them to have a healthy understanding of what sex is. Don't ever want them to feel pressured. I want them to ask me if they have questions. But I never, even today, I would never talk to my parents about it ever. I'm just not comfortable. And I want my kids to be comfortable, right? I don't want them to be afraid to talk to me about anything. And I was afraid to talk to my parents about most things. So that's one thing that I'm changing.
And I think Vietnam as a country is changing too. I think that there are, one of my friends, I think over at Vietcetera, they're doing something called Cởi mở. Cởi mở just means being open, but it also has this double entendre of, being naked. But not really. It's just, being open. And I think they talk, they have talks about sexuality, and it's one of their biggest, I think, podcasts or sections in their write-ups.
Right, which, by the way, because Vietnamese people culturally don't openly talk about sex, what better way to reach them than through a program like that, right? They're all going to want to listen. Even the lady out in the, làm việc ngoài ruộng, she would still want to listen to it too. That to her is like, oh, wow. So what a platform. I think that's great. And we shouldn't be so ashamed. And it's so male driven, like Vietnamese women aren't supposed to be that interested in sex. It's not proper. That's so wrong. Why deny Vietnamese women such an important and pleasurable part of life?
I think that eventually, if you took a year to really get comfortable with your Vietnamese, you don't really have to be armed with so much vocabulary to do consenting adults in the Vietnamese language.
No, I don't, I don't know, because I don't know the terms and I don't know how to.
How many terms are there? There's 100 maybe that you can learn,
I know, but Vietnamese is so one meaning can have 20 words that say the same thing. You've probably seen, have you seen that thing on social media about the word Vietnamese and word chết?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so chết is chết, nhưng mà qua đời cũng là chết.
Right.
Mất cũng là chết. And so there's so many words, and it depending on the context and who you're talking to and how you want it to come across, which is why I love Vietnamese.
Right.
But oh my gosh, if I can't talk about business speaking Vietnamese, you think I can talk about sex in Vietnamese?
Well, if you think about it, every sector only has a certain amount of vocabulary, right? And you're just repeating the vocabulary. Let's just say there's 100 words that you kind of need to know. And then if you kind of now you know how to use them, every story is different, but you're using this sort of the same vocabulary and I say this because I would love to hear this program
in Vietnamese.
In Vietnamese. Oh my God, can you imagine?
Well, wait a second. Your Vietnamese is very good. I've seen your shows. I'm so impressed that as young as you are, you've got such a command of the language. So then now let me ask you, if I was to say turned on in Vietnamese, how would I say that?
That's a good question. You put
Đó, thấy chưa?
I only know the bad ways to say it, and that's not good. Like I know how to say horny in Vietnamese on the street, but I don't know the science.
Wait, just tell me the letter that it starts with.
N.
Okay, I know that one word too, but I can't say it.
Yeah.
Right, but is there a polite way to say that?
There is. There's a polite for every slang word. There's always a scientific or a formal way of expressing.
Okay, because I don't know if there's a formal way. Nhưng mà nếu mà bóng gió, okay, if you speak that way, right?
Yes.
Maybe you can do it.
You can definitely.
Nhưng mà it just sounds it's so difficult. Who's going to teach me, Ken?
I think, oh my God, Leyna, I think there's plenty of people that you know in this community that can teach you that. I think there's a lot of people. You just need to train yourself for about 6 months and you will nail it.
I don't know. So let me tell you this, like a lot of the Vietnamese that I know, I learned from traveling with singers. 85% of it I never use because I can't. I can't. I've heard singers say stuff that shock me. To me, it's so vulgar. Yeah. And I just can't do it. Nhưng mà bây giờ kiếm ai giờ?
No, but wouldn't it be...
Do Nam Lộc. So I say, Nam Lộc, can you teach me how to talk about sex in Vietnamese?
Absolutely. And here's the beauty of what I think that I'm doing, and I'm not to my horn. The discovery process is actually the beauty of it. Because I'll ask my guests all the time, dạ thưa bác, giải thích cho con nghe tiếng Việt cái câu đó như thế nào được không? In the discovery that we're discovering it, people are also discovering it too. And then because they're hearing maybe like a Vietnamese person who speaks it as their first language, they're hearing it being perceived from an American angle for the first time. There's a lot of interesting and perspective of that's happening in that way. They're like, whoa, I didn't put it that way.
The other problem is, though, the Vietnamese people don't want to share this stuff. And they don't have the same kind of trust that you will protect and keep them anonymous.
I think you'd be surprised, just like you're surprised.
I don't know. I will tell you, I did have a Vietnamese person reach out to me on Twitter. And they're swingers. And they said there are a lot
Can introduce you to some Vietnamese
wife swapping in the Vietnamese community. I've heard about it before. I know that a lot of like people who are more well off, we're talking about doctors mostly, who take part in this kind of activity. I bet you none of them will talk to me because they're in the shadows. They've got their own little, circle. They're not willing to talk about it. So in actuality, người Việt mình không có cởi mở when it comes to this stuff like other people are.
Không, nhưng mà chưa cởi mở chứ không phải là
chưa. Không, bây giờ thì không. Nhưng mà
it'll happen.
Look at it positively, chưa?
Yeah, and then being a part of that early wave of somebody who brings this unique topic. You know what I've just, about a year ago, there's an acquaintance on Facebook that I saw. She went into Hanoi, somewhere in the countryside, close to Hanoi. There is a nudist colony up there. Yeah. I
really?
Yeah, she took pictures from afar, so she didn't really show, but you could see men were naked, and it was mind blowing. So that's happening. I mean, there weren't like 5 of them. There were like a lot of them, 20, 30 of these men or women walking around.
That's awesome.
Blown away.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I wish I just. Okay, I'm going to talk to Nam Lao. I also learned so much from him. If it wasn't for my music, working for Asia and especially him, I've learned so much Vietnamese from him. I don't know how he's going to think if I call him up and say, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's do it in Vietnamese.
After we stop recording, I will talk to you more about certain people that we know mutually that can probably point you in the right direction.
Okay. And do you really think that the Vietnamese audience is ready to embrace that?
Here's the way I look at this. 95 million people in Vietnam.
You only need a fraction of them.
You only need 1% of 1% to make a ding in whatever you're doing. Think about that. And then a lot of people used to question me about like this podcast, like 2, 3, 4 hours. Like, who's listening to this? Oh, well, I've studied the history of like where this format has been in America, and I know the trajectory of where it's going. Again, it goes back to that out of 94 million people there, maybe 2, 3 million diaspora. You only need 1% of 1%.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess we need to talk off camera.
Yeah. Leyna, I want to thank you so much for taking a leap of faith and, speaking with me today. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot, as usual, with somebody who has so much experience about the work that they do.
Well, thank you. And I do want to let your audience know that people ask to interview me all the time. And even though I do it for a living, I hate being interviewed. And I especially am hesitant to do it for any Vietnamese audience because, especially, back in the day when I would be interviewed every once in a while, there's something about Vietnamese are very critical, right? Very, very critical. And my Vietnamese isn't good enough to speak like we are speaking, to really get into it. It's just not good enough. And I know that I'll get hate for it. They say that, nếu mà người Việt Nam tại sao không nói tiếng Việt Nam? Thì nếu mà nói chuyện mà hỏi thăm hoặc là, nói chuyện chơi thôi, that's fine.
Right.
Nhưng mà when you ask me about my work, không có biết những cái danh từ, I don't know how to express it, which is why I don't do it. So, I wish I did, and I hope that more and more people will listen and maybe not laugh and not be so critical, right? Like my youngest brother, if people didn't laugh at him so much, maybe he would have learned a little more Vietnamese. But now, if you try to teach him, he's like, no.
Yeah.
Because he's afraid of being laughed at, right? So
yeah,
so thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. I understand how it feels to come onto a program that potentially the audience can be a little judgy, but I think we the both of us, we sit here in complete authenticity and being genuine that we're trying to learn something from each other, and I think that's sort of like the goal of, and that's why I talk about consenting what you do, your podcast in Vietnamese. It's just about learning what things that are not being open public knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
let's make it happen.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.
All right, thank you, Ken.